Alrighty, good afternoon, Health Hub community. I hope you're all well and having a wonderful Wednesday. Welcome to our final Facebook Live on the topic of sugar. So over the last month or so, Tom, myself a little bit, and we've seen Jack as well, have taken you through the physiology around the influence that too much sugar can have on our health and our metabolic health especially. Then we've gone into some detail around, how supermarkets and government programs and advertising and marketing can almost, I suppose, promote sugar quite excessively and make it quite difficult for us to avoid. And as such, why I suppose it's almost set up, the community is almost set up for it to be really challenging to avoid sugar and actually, make healthy or take healthy options when it comes to our diet from the perspective of sugar. So hopefully you feel like you've got a lot out of all of the videos that we've done previously. They are all still there for your reference too. There's some other great resources that we've popped in to, I suppose, summarise those Facebook Lives as well, which are posted below in the group too. So what we're going to do today with our final one is we've received some really good questions over the last month around the concept of sugar. So we've done some research and we've got some really, I suppose, good answers for those ones today, which we're going to go into some depth about. So let's kick off with fake sugars.
Yeah. So one of the questions that came to us was, what about fake sugars or artificial sweeteners, and are they a good option to have instead of sugar? And it's a great question, and unfortunately, there's no real black or white answer at this point. So thought we'd go into a little bit about what they are and then how they might be different to normal sugar and whether they're a healthier option as well. So first thing to note is that there's the sort of fake artificial sugars, but there's also some other, I guess, substances where you can get sugar like naturally, like honey, monk fruit, maple syrup, and these kind of products. And it's important to know that these are still just carbohydrates and fructose, and they have the exact same response as table sugar. So you're going to get the same issues at your liver if you're consuming a lot of these kind of foods. So don't be fooled by the term of them being natural. Yes, they're found in nature, but doesn't mean they're not high in fructose as well. So that's the first part to that question. But getting into what are artificial sweeteners. So they come in different brand names like Splenda. There's one called aspartame, which is one of the most prominent ones in Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi and other foods as well, and another one called stevia. And there's many more as well, but those are the most well-known ones, I guess. So they're different chemical compounds to sugar. They have no calories in them, so a little bit different to sugar. And then, like I said, we're used in lots of zero sugar drinks and foods, and can also be bought separately to use in cooking and baking and stuff like that. It's important to know that while they don't have any sugar in them, or there's zero sugar, that doesn't necessarily mean they've got zero metabolic effects. So that's important to know as we go into how they can affect the body. So they don't contain sugar, obviously. They don't contain calories, but as we know, that doesn't really matter when it comes to weight loss anymore. But there's important metabolic effects that they can have, and they can sort of trick your body in a number of ways as well. So just the fact of having something sweet on your tongue. So these products are really, really sweet, arguably sweeter than sugar. And when the sweetness gets sort of felt on your tongue, it can kind of confuse the brain and still actually cause the digestive system and your pancreas and your liver to produce insulin and drive weight gain and disease. And this is because once your tongue senses something sweet, the rest of your brain and your body basically expects that there's going to be some calories and some food coming in, so it basically prepares for that. And even if it doesn't come, they're still having that influence. So that's one of the ways that it can impact your body. They can also alter your intestinal microbiome. So the bacteria in your gut can potentially cause things like leaky gut and other gastrointestinal issues as well. Your fat cells have receptors that are sensitive to artificial sweeteners as well. So they may still encourage the uptake of energy and storage of energy despite having taken these artificial sweeteners up. And it can have a very similar response on dopamine in your brain. So leave you still the sweet taste can leave you still craving more sweet foods. And whether you continue to consume the fake sugars or real sugar, the brain doesn't really care about that. If it's hungry, it's going to want to bring something in. So you may end up eating more while you're still having these kind of fake sugars anyway. So there's also quite a bit of evidence to show that those that are already overweight or already carrying more weight around their midsection, this can lead to sort of switching to artificial sweeteners may not see the same weight loss effect, or may see better weight loss effects than just normal sugar, but that's only in those that are already not processing sugar particularly well. So it can have some good effects and some bad effects, and there's no real sort of black or white around the topic, unfortunately. We don't really know for certain in the long term whether they're a good option, but I think it's pretty, if you wanted a short answer, it's probably better than sugar, but not by much. That's what I would go with. So it's a pretty complex topic. I think slightly better than sugar, but if you can go without them altogether, that's going to be a better option for you. Yeah.
Another question we kind of get a lot is fruit healthy?
Yeah.
Argument is, isn't it just sugar? And again, a bit like Tom's answer to that question, it's not really black or white. It depends on the context. For a little bit of a background on what fruit is, fruit in its whole form, for example, a whole apple, it's not just sugar and fructose, but it is fibre, it's got some antioxidants, it's got lots of water in there as well. That fibre and the antioxidants can help feed the gut bacteria, which is a good thing, a really great thing about fruit. That fibre that's in the whole fruit, that can kind of also prevent the full absorption of that sugar. So you're essentially getting less of a spike of insulin having that whole fruit. That compared to if you take away the fibre, say you juice your fruit, whether that's at home or whether that's buying an apple juice from the supermarket, you've taken away that fibre, and that can then kind of send that fructose directly straight to the liver, and then you get that really big spike in insulin levels that Tom just kind of suggested, and over the last few weeks can really drive up disease and weight gain, which is not such a great thing. But again, then it's different for those who already have poor metabolic health. So those people that can't metabolize sugar as effectively as they'd like, so people with type 1 or type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, fatty liver disease, they really probably shouldn't be having anything that increases their glucose and insulin levels like whole fruit can. So whether it's whole fruit, grains, wheat, any of that stuff that drives up those insulin levels. When you break those down, it's still just sugar. Fruit as a whole can be a healthier option. Whole grains are painted as a pretty healthy option as well. But when your body breaks it down, it's just sugar. And if you're not metabolically healthy, it's not going to be a good thing for you. No, and that's kind of the crux of it with is fruit healthy, is that people with or who can metabolize sugar effectively, fruit in moderation is probably not a bad choice. But for those that can't metabolize sugar really effectively, it's probably something that should really be avoided. Yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah. Sure. So the next question we got, and I really hope that some of my friends watch this, because so many of them say that when we're potentially, not that we've unfortunately been able to do it much this year, but we might be sitting at the pub having a meal and watching the footy. They all say, I'm going to go for not beer or something like that because they want to, look after their skin folds and whatnot. And they go, if I have a soda water based option with some alcohol, but that's going to be, better for them metabolically. So we thought we did get a question around this as well. So before we actually dive into the different types of alcohol and the influence that they have from, or how much sugar they have, we thought we'd just touch quickly on what alcohol itself actually does to the body metabolically as well. So excess alcohol can cause abnormal activation of digestive enzymes in the pancreas. Mm-hmm. And we know that the pancreas is a really important organ because it controls insulin. Yeah. All right. The other organ at play here is obviously our liver, and our liver is effectively like the center for metabolic regulation in the body. It stabilizes our sugars and carbohydrates, controls circulating levels of triglycerides and free fatty acids, cholesterol, all of those things. And I don't think it's a great secret that excess alcohol can certainly interfere with this process and lead to some pretty complex conditions of the liver, cirrhosis, fatty liver disease, etc. So
and this used to be the only cause of fatty liver. So to go back 60 years ago when sugar wasn't as prevalent, if you had fatty liver, you were probably an alcoholic. Nowadays, kids can get it because they're consuming so much sugar.
So, like I said, we know that the pancreas regulates insulin and our response to glucose, and consumption of alcohol actually leads to excessive secretion of insulin, which can as such cause hypoglycemia. So there's so much insulin that's basically driving our glucose levels down effectively. So the mechanism for actually why this excessive secretion of insulin happens in response to alcohol, there's still a fair bit of conflicting research over, but there is certainly an overwhelming, I suppose, basis of evidence that a lot of alcohol will lead to a lot of insulin. And, Tom spoke in depth quite a couple of weeks ago now about why excessive insulin is bad. But before Tom just touches on that again, lots of alcohol can cause damage to our pancreas as well. This can lead to hyperinsulinemia, too much insulin, and that in such can cause beta cell dysfunction, where then all of a sudden we actually, can't produce enough insulin, and as such, that leads to insulin resistance. Insulin
contributes to the vicious cycle that we've spoken about as well between those things.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you think back to a number of the Facebook Lives that we've done on insulin and why it's so bad, when we see a rise in insulin, we're going to see a promotion of excess energy, whether it's in the form of glucose not being used, and there's finite stores of how we can store glucose as glycogen in the liver and the muscle. When that gets overloaded, the liver starts to convert the excess sugar and glucose into fat and pumping that throughout the body as well. When we drink alcohol, it's more difficult for the liver to process alcohol, and now we can see a vicious cycle further forming. So we're drinking more alcohol on top of the sugar. It's working even less efficiently, basically. And then when we get fat in the liver, in the pancreas, in the brain, and the muscle, this causes some insulin resistance, which then just makes the cycle worse again. So the more we drink, the more this occurs, and the more resistant we become to insulin as well, regardless of how much sugar is actually in the alcohol. Yeah.
And back to Jack's mates that go the soda water option, we thought we'd talk about the carbohydrate content in some alcoholic drinks just to kind of bust some myths there and kind of get a picture of how much sugar is actually in those. So if you're like Jack and you're drinking the beer, which is just hops and fermented grains, it's essentially just liquid bread, really. Beer's generally got kind of 13 grams of carbohydrate per standard drink, which is pretty significant, really.
Yeah.
Things like wine have a little bit less kind of carbohydrate content per standard drink. Your dry wines have got about 0.5 gram of carbohydrates per standard drink, and your sweeter wines, so like your rosés, your red wines, things my girlfriend like drinking, a little bit more, kind of 4 grams of carbohydrates per standard drink. Then kind of, if you're looking at the alcoholic drinks that have minimal kind of carbohydrate content, you're looking at your spirits, your straight spirits there, and those drinks in their purest form have pretty much none, no sugar really.
All the other detrimental effects which we just spoke about in terms of alcohol driving up your insulin, that's from a sugar content, they've got none.
No. Then,
they taste pretty good.
if you then add your mixer to that, like Jack kind of talked about before with someone drinking a vodka soda kind of thing, and that would end up with about still 18 grams of kind of carbohydrates. If you're going something like a vodka orange juice or something like that. Rum and Coke's at 22 grams of carbohydrates, gin and tonic's at 14 grams of carbohydrates. So you can still see that they've got quite a lot of sugar in them, really.
More than beer.
Yeah.
More than beer, and it adds to Tom's vicious cycle from before, adding these excess carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And then you get to your lolly water, your breezes, your cruisers that have got 30 grams of carbohydrates, which are more than most soft drinks, really, and that's further compounding all those.
I think one of the reasons behind that is, again, like we've spoken about, to make things taste good and make us buy more, you make them sweeter. So alcohol by itself doesn't taste that great, especially if you're 18. And the people that buy those kind of drinks, they need to just pump it full of sugar to see any kind of change. So in the taste. So that's probably why they've got more than even just a bottle of soft drink. Yeah. The last question, which I think was a really good one, is what are some more resources where I can find out more about this as well? So over the course of the researching for this series and throughout the year, I've been reading quite a few books, watching quite a few movies that I think everyone that's found this in any way interesting would really like. So I'll go through a few of those now. There's a book called Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz, and this is about how fat was made out to be the villain in diet, based on some shoddy science and why that may not be the case. So that's a really good one around fat. A book called Fat Chance by Robert Lustig, and this is all about sugar in the diet and how it impacts all aspects of our diet, really. Two books by Jason Fung called The Obesity Code and The Diabetes Code. These focus a little bit more on, they definitely focus on carbohydrate and sugar, but also around fasting and the benefit that that can have on your health. And I know one of our group members, Alice, so hello to Alice if you're watching, has been asking about those books, and we'd highly recommend, if you have type 2 diabetes or not, to give those a bit of a look. There's also some other books around insulin resistance and sugar, such as Why We Get Sick by Ben Bickman, Why We Get Fat, and The Case Against Sugar by Gary Taubes as well. So those are a couple of books for anyone that's looking for something to do at the moment in lockdown. Can't recommend them highly enough, and I think you'll definitely take away some good messages there. For those that are a little bit less inclined to spend some time reading, there's also a couple of great documentaries that you can watch. So the first one is actually by made here in Melbourne. It's called That Sugar Film, and I think it was actually produced sort of in St Kilda or quite close to here. And that does a really good job of outlining the impact that sugar has on our health. The guy that makes the documentary actually changes his diet to eat a lot more sugar than he normally does. Doesn't feel so great, and then when he goes back to eating a lower carbohydrate diet, he feels much better. So that's a really good film, and it breaks the science down really nicely as well. And then a new documentary that's come out at the moment, earlier this year, it's called Fat Fiction, and it kind of goes into how fat has been demonized and how using a very low carbohydrate diet and fasting might actually be a better way to improve health as well. And a lot of the authors that I mentioned earlier that wrote those books are in that movie as well. So those are a couple of documentaries that you might like to seek out. The Fat Fiction is on Amazon Prime if you have that. That Sugar Film, I think it's on the ABC app, but you might have to just double check that. It might be on YouTube as well. And always, I guess, whenever you're watching documentaries on nutrition, it's important to know as well, just and be aware of any conflicts of interest and things like that, and whether people have been paid to make those kind of movies, because sometimes they might only present one side of the story and not just the science and what's going to be best for health. So yeah, those are a couple of great resources that I really like, and I think you guys would get a lot out of those as well. So we wanted to sort of wrap everything up. Thanks to everyone for watching today. Those that sent in the questions, thank you very much. And today marks our last Facebook Live video for August on sugar. I hope you found them really informative, entertaining, and potentially might lead to some behaviour change in anyone that's watched as well. So keep an eye out for some future Facebook Lives that we're doing. We're just sort of organising the topics for the next month, but we'll be posting them soon enough, and hopefully some things to keep everyone busy in lockdown as well. Thanks to Dill for joining today as well, and enjoy your afternoon.
Bye guys.
See ya.